Welcome to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing. I am Gyi Sakalakis from Attorney Sync, and I am at ABA TECHSHOW.
And I'm Conrad Som from Mockingbird, and I am on the other end of the country in Las Vegas at Mass Torts Made Perfect.
I should have mentioned that I was in Chicago. Today on Lunch Hour Legal Marketing, we're going to talk about what we're talking about at our relative conferences and talking about the experience of recording remotely from conferences. The internet is always a challenge. And, Conrad and I were talking about the interesting duality of sponsoring the Wi-Fi at a conference. Conrad, what do you think about the Wi-Fi sponsorship?
I think the Wi-Fi sponsorship is generally sold to someone who has never used Wi-Fi at a conference, because you invariably end up with swearing and cursing and lost data, and it is a pain in the ass. Although, if you do that password, I know the password here, it's about a funding company. So it gets in your mind, but boy, oh boy, if it goes down, everyone hates you, not the conference organizer.
I hear that, and that is classic conference issue, sponsoring the Wi-Fi, but you really do talk about it. I mean, you want to be top of mind. All publicity is good publicity. Sponsor the Wi-Fi, which unfortunately we cannot be using because it did not work. So thank goodness for 5G.
Yes. Thank you, Smokeball, for providing us with this opportunity to banter about Smokeball and Wi-Fi and sponsorship. It seems like almost everything these days is sponsored at these conferences, Gyi. It's kind of out of control.
Well, and on the, since you gave Smokeball a knock for sponsoring the Wi-Fi, I will give them a positive. They threw an outstanding party last night. And, I think that's one thing, too, about just the conferences in general is like, get out there and meet the people, right? You come to these things, a lot of this content, you can get it online. If you're in person, go to the parties and side events, even though a lot of them are sponsored. I think that that's one of the most valuable ways to, build your own community and get involved in the show communities. But enough about that for now. What else do we got today, Conrad?
We are starting, as always, with the news. There's a lot of conversation about AI, which is not a surprise. And we're going to get a little bit political in the news with Trump going after the legal system. And next, we're going to get into the meat of the podcast. We're going to talk about what we're talking about at our respective conference sessions.
Talking Conrad, about what we're talking about, that is meta.
Yeah. Let's sit down and think about that for a while.
Lockwood, pretend music.
Welcome to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing, teaching you how to promote, market, and make fat stacks for your legal practice. Here on Legal Talk Network.
Welcome to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing. Let's start, as always, with the news. All right, Gyi, lots of stuff. We've had a paucity of news in the past, recent episodes, and now we are going to have a long news section. Paucity, there you go. There's your SAT word for the day, brought to you by Smokeball. All right, what's going on with Google Business Profiles?
So Google Business Profiles that people have been tracking, we talked about this before, but it was just in a test, and we're seeing it more widely rolled out, that they're switching from the Q&A section to a AI ask about this business interface. And so instead of being like, we've talked about how you can populate the Q&As on your GBP profile, talk about, features and benefits and service offerings, positioning and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's all going away, it looks like, and now they're going to be using Gemini so that users can actually ask, like, hey, is this a good lawyer, or how long has this lawyer been practicing? They're obviously going to ask other questions than that, but just to give people a sense of that. If you're not seeing this yet, you can test it on Google Maps, search for lawyers in Kentucky, and click into their Google Business Profiles. It appears that for sure it's been rolled out in Kentucky. I haven't seen it in a lot of our clients, haven't switched to it yet in major markets. So I think it's kind of going to be one of these slow rolls, but I do suspect that we're going to see more of that.
All right, while we're talking about Google and AI, Google launched their AI mode. Talk to me about that, Gyi.
Yeah, so it's only experimental, similar to what they did with the SGE. It's only in labs, so you've got to opt into it as an experiment. But I would encourage folks to go opt in and try the experiment. It is very GPTE. It feels like Google response to ChatGPT. This is where, and we're going to talk more about this in other news segments and even in some of the conversations about what we're talking about at our shows. But you're going to see this switch from search to conversational. Google doesn't exactly have it figured out yet. There's still a one-trick pony with ads. But I think if you want to take a peek at where this is all headed for Google, go take a look at what they're doing with their Google AI mode.
And just to complete the Google trifecta of news, Google Notebook around the web. What's going on with this, Gyi?
So if you haven't used their the Notebook tool, it used to be that you would feed the Notebook tool. The example that we use, you can upload a podcast and it will do that summary of the podcast. There's a bunch of other applications you can use with Notebook, but now they're allowing you to access information from around the web, so you can apply Notebook to access to all sorts of internet information. It makes Notebook a much more robust tool. So I would go experiment with that too. And I think in the marketing context, again, you're going to see people as they start to use Notebook for a variety of different ways. One of those ways might be to do research about their life legal issue. And if they're doing that in Notebook, seeing where Notebook pulls information from is going to be useful for you of trying to be a part of that consideration set as users are going through their journey of like doing life legal research, looking for lawyers, comparing and contrasting lawyers. Again, the fundamental shift that's changing is the way that we access these technologies with AI embedded in them.
All right, Gyi, let's switch from Mountain View to Washington, D.C. We have kind of not touched on politics on this pod. I know every time I flirt with it, I can feel you just wishing I would shut up. But there's a lot of conversation. I understand at ABA TECHSHOW, there was a lot of conversation down here in Vegas about Trump really going after the profession. So the American Immigration Lawyers Association has been specifically named in an executive order. Trump has had two really, White Shoe, Skadden and Paul Weiss have completely cravenly capitulated to the demands of the White House. Perkins Coie standing strong. There's been a lot of fallout on this, and I'm happy to see there was a lady from Skadden who resigned. I hope some more people resign from Skadden. I hope they lose business because of this. There are students who are refusing to go to recruiting events at Skadden specifically. And our good friend and long-standing friend of the pod, one of the first people I ever met in the industry, Carolyn Elephant, on behalf of Solos, put together an amicus brief. The deadline for that is April 9th. You will be hearing this after that deadline, which is unfortunate. But a lot going on, a lot of conversation about politics and the legal profession. Any thoughts? I mean, you are the philosopher major with a JD. What do you think? And a full-on constitutionalist, right?
Well, let's look at it this way. We're a show about marketing law firms, but
okay.
In the essence of marketing law firms, you have to have the rule of law, and you have to have a judiciary. And so, ranking in Google is going to be meaningless if there's no law. And so, I'm a member of the State Bar of Michigan. I was very proud the State Bar of Michigan put out their messaging on the rule of law. The ABA has put out several messages in support of the rule of law. And, I just feel we have to stand up for this stuff. Like, this is as lawyers, this is our existence, right? And we know the anecdotes. We've heard the stories. You kill all the lawyers first. This is serious stuff, and I think that it's behooves all of our obligation to stand up for the rule of law, especially as lawyers. So if you're listening to this and rolling your eyes because you think that we're politicizing this, honestly, shame on you, because
wow,
if we can't be aligned on the rule of law, none of this stuff matters. End of rant. Dropping the mic.
Okay, honestly, that might be the best thing I have heard you say on this pod ever. I love that.
Well,
Shame on you.
let that be a reflection of how serious. Again, I don't get into this stuff, but when the state bars around the country are reminding people that we are a country of laws, it's like, wake up, folks.
All right, let's hope the next taping of Lunch Hour Legal Marketing is not from El Salvador. Okay, moving on to something a little bit more fun. Jessica Hawkins from ConsultWebs sent us an outstanding note on the best legal podcasts of 2025. And the cool thing is, she actually researched it and listened to podcasts, and it's not just put together by garbage AI. And I also happen to know that she recently received a promotion. So thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah.
And I
Well
look, I appreciated that she actually did the work to actually, because as we've joked in the past, some of these lists are, AI generated, for lack of a better way of saying it. And I'll also say this though, and I'm not going to say that Jessica was thinking like this, but think about how strategic it might have been to get some visibility for ConsultWebs on Lunch Hour Legal Marketing by reviewing podcasts. Right. And I bet you some of those other podcasts will also reference that list. So for lawyers, if you're connecting those dots there, being involved in local community podcasting and local sports podcasting and politics podcasting, listening to those shows and talking about them is also a way for you to get visibility and awareness for your own brand on the shows themselves.
And finally, and this is not a news item, but I am desperately seeking to add an amazing customer success person to my team. I'm pretty sure that this is the first time we've been soliciting employment on Lunch Hour Legal Marketing. Gyi's above this, I know that, but we're looking for a great, amazing
congratulations,
CS person.
You're hiring. I love it. Why don't you, for folks that have no idea, where can they go and look for this job description and stuff? Is that on the website?
It's on the website. Yeah.
On the website. So if you want, what are you looking for here?
Let me put this differently. If you can't find it on the internet, we don't want to talk to you.
Or shame on you because you're trying to market this position and it's hard to find.
You know what I should do?
Internet marketer.
This is what we should do. I should hide it somewhere carefully on the web, and you have to be clever enough to figure out where that is.
I'll tell you where you should put it. Put it in your GBP.
On the second page of Google?
No, put it in your GBP post. That's the only place. People got to search Mockingbird Marketing, click through. You got to increase that.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Click manipulation brought to you by Lunch Hour Legal Marketing.
That's not click manipulation. That's just you're trying to put your job posting out there. Where else would you put it?
All right, everyone. If you are watching us on YouTube, you're seeing a cool background for Gyi out in Chicago. I've got the beautiful mountains of Nevada. I think it's Nevada if you're actually from here in our background. But take a moment to like, subscribe. Let's keep the conversation going. Leave us a comment. Be like Jessica. We will call you out on the show. We'll answer your questions, whatever you may have. And we'll also throw a link to another episode you might like in the comments on YouTube here.
Conrad, what conference are you at?
So I am at Vegas, Mass Torts Made Perfect. There is all sorts of crazy money going around. I'm not really a Vegas person. I don't really fit the vibe here, but it is a perfect setting for Mass Torts Made Perfect. Lots of speakers. Terry Bradshaw was here. They had Miranda Lambert yesterday, who I learned is a country singer, apparently. That's how out of touch I am.
Your pop culture knowledge.
With pop culture, I thought it was a talk about Miranda rights or something. I don't know. Anyway,
did you get a picture with any of these
I
famous
wouldn't know
people?
Miranda Lambert Terry Bradshaw if they were in the car with me. I wouldn't know.
Okay.
But there was lots of photographing. There was people lining up for photographs, and it's as Vegas as you can possibly get. Paris Hilton was here last year, and there's massive lines to get pictures with Paris Hilton. So anyway, but
give the people what they want.
Instead of that, give the people what they want, which was apparently Miranda Lambert and Paris Hilton and Terry Bradshaw.
And Conrad Somm.
Shaquan Barkley and one Conrad Somm for a small donation to the Mass Torts Made Perfect Foundation, which helps people not kick puppies. I got...
And how much do you have to pay to get a picture with Conrad Somm?
Oh, you know what? I don't know. We should work
You
on
should
that.
you're giving them away for free. I can tell.
Yeah.
You're
I am not.
undervaluing your likeness.
I will tell you this: having searched Miranda Lambert and Shaquan Barkley and Paris Hilton, the only one that looks worse than me is Terry Bradshaw. So I don't.
I think
I'm not
technically it's Saquon Barkley, but I'm not keeping
Saquon.
score.
All right. Huh. Yeah. See,
All
I,
right.
I had to look. I had to look that one up too. Sorry, we've let this go for far too long. The question you were going to ask me is, what are you talking about here?
You're right. You read my mind.
I've put together, we started Mockingbird back in 2013, and we've been doing data from day one and collecting data from day one. And what I basically did is I've grabbed 18 slides, 18 graphs that showcase how what we think is going to happen and what vendors want us to believe is happening are actually not really true. And so they were just kind of 18 separate concepts. The one that I found really fascinating, and you mentioned that there may be a Google issue with this as well, but targeting. So we looked at a meta targeting campaign, and it was targeting this specific example. There were 4 counties in New Jersey that you could define in meta and actually look and just target people in those 4 counties. When we actually looked at the lat long and plotted the lat long of the people who had actually looked at the ad, who received the advertisement, we found that 29.7% of those people were outside of those 4 counties. And most of them were outside actually New Jersey. So that's one of those examples. We used L2, which is a data accumulator, to actually do this analysis.
This is super interesting to me. Lots of sub points here. Walk us through how this data analysis worked, because you're saying, I want to make sure I've got this right for listeners' benefit.
Yep.
You're saying we were advertising on Meta in these specific counties, and we got what? You found you had contact records of people that didn't live in the counties, or because couldn't they have been in the county with their phone, and then when they filled out their information or they became a client or a lead, they were used their home address. Talk to me about that connection of how did you discern that Meta got it wrong?
So
that's what you're saying, right? You're saying Meta got it wrong, right? Okay.
Yep. The lat long of the locations of the people who received those ads, we were able to get back. And then L2 plotted both of that on a map, right?
It was the lat long at the time they responded to the ad?
That is correct.
Okay.
The time that it's not a response to the ad, that they saw the ad.
Okay, right.
Right? So Google thinks that this person lives in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, but they're actually in North Dakota, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a 30% error rate, right? Which if you're spending tons of money with bad geotargeting, and you're trying to do geotargeting, that's super, super problematic, right?
Well, and this is a great point, because it's what's your actionable takeaway here? I mean, you're not saying not to buy on Meta, you're not saying not to buy media on Google, right? Or are you saying that?
So this is my actionable takeaway on this. This was a lesson that I'm kind of a takeaway. If you have a large targeted spend, and not necessarily pay-per-click, but I'm talking about programmatic display. If you have a large targeted spend, relying directly on the publishers for their own targeting is somewhat of it's not a fool's errand, but it is certainly not extremely accurate. And there are services through which you can go to make sure that your targeting is a lot more accurate. You can still advertise on Facebook, but go through a service that will actually make sure that they run the targeting for you instead of relying on that end publisher. Because what happens is, you're wasting 30% of that budget, but it's also driving up the clicks everywhere, the cost of everything else everywhere as well, right? And so it's a self-reinforcing thing where the worse the targeting is, the broader the targeting is, and we've seen this with keywords as well, we've seen this with brand versus non-brand, the worse the targeting is, systemically, the more the publisher makes, because they're able to serve more clicks that otherwise wouldn't have received $1, right?
Right.
And go ahead.
No, this makes me think of two things that are in the same theme but different contexts. One is click fraud, right? So if you're not using something to filter click fraud, ClickSense, or you can go look for click fraud filtering, it's the same problem. It's like the what you think you're buying, you're not really buying. And so I'm totally with you on holding the platforms accountable, whether it's with technology, third-party providers. I think also, especially if you have the budget, if you got the sustainable budget where you've got dedicated account reps, go hammer your rep. Go talk to your rep and be like, look, what are you doing here? Like, get some credits, and we do this all the time where it's like, you got to give us some money back because you spend our money poorly, to the platform I'm talking about. The other one that I think about, though, is, and this is harder for programmatic and, if you're doing brand awareness or those kind of campaigns, but this is why for direct response, you have to be focused on cost per qualified lead because, again, there's going to be waste no matter what you do. You can add the additional filtering. You can, maybe that gets you down from 30% waste to 10% waste. You can add the click fraud filtering. Maybe that gets you another 5%. I mean, I'm just making numbers up here. You decrease the waste, and you should do those things. But at the end of the day, the only relevant question is that media buy with all those costs involved, the waste, the actual media spend, the additional expense of the technology you're using to filter it, is that still generating qualified consultations and cases for you? Everything else is irrelevant.
Right.
And so all those things will improve it. Those should improve it, right? They should ideally, if you're actually, better targeting, getting rid of some of that click fraud waste, those things should help you improve your cost per client and cost per qualified consultation.
One of the other slides that we threw out there is a very common misperception with pay-per-click budgets, which is, it is the exact inverse of what you just described. People are trying to buy more clicks within a given budget, right? And they're looking at that as being successful. And if you take 5 seconds to think about how stupid that is, you'll realize that anyone who is driving...
Let's take 5 seconds to think how stupid it is.
Okay, let me explain. If you're taking 5 seconds and you haven't caught up with Conrad's concept of why this is stupid, let me explain. Let's use an extreme. Mesothelioma lawyer is very expensive. If I'm bidding on mesothelioma lawyer for, let's call it $200, I can buy a lot more clicks for the word law, right? For $2 a click or $5 a click, or the Detroit Lions, it might be, or the Detroit Lions lawyer, right? Like you can do lots of things to get more clicks.
There are cheap clicks out there available. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we showed. Go ahead.
Yeah, go. No, go ahead.
Well,
While you're talking, I'm going to look it up.
Well, this is going to seem like the self-serving part of all this stuff.
It is. Like, this is very self-serving.
Well, this is why, how can, you're a do-it-yourself lawyer who's like going to go, thinks like, I'm listening to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing. These guys are talking, they're trying to help me understand which channels are working and blah, blah. I got some infrastructure stuff, but the average do-it-yourself lawyer they're not doing all this stuff. They're opening an account up, they're adding their credit card, and they're buying.
Right.
And it's just like, and you've said this before, and I will say this. I think I've even kind of pushed back because I've tried to be the fair arbiter of like, look, you can go do this stuff yourself. But you think about it in this context, no, you can't. No one's filtering out click fraud. No one's holding none of these do-it-yourself lawyers are holding platforms accountable for like bad media targeting.
That's right.
They're seeing the waste, and then they're like, this is super expensive. Turn off the account. This stuff doesn't work.
And Google has made this worse by deliberately pushing you towards volume of clicks.
It's not just Google.
You're right. But like you were talking about back in the day, I would encourage a solo to go and say, like, you could learn how to do this effectively as a solo if you spent a little bit of time to understand the difference between broad and phrase match, and you'd had a little modicum understanding of negative keywords. Like,
you can get really conservative. You get your very tight matching. You might not do volume, but you could do it.
You could do it, and it was fine. And you can't anymore. So the example that we used here, this was a campaign that we over 5 quarters we picked up from another agency. They were doing, this is one of the graphs I shared, 4.3 thousand clicks a quarter to generate 54 leads, right? With the same budget, we only bought, 844 clicks, right? So we increased the amount we were paying per click, decreased the overall volume, but the number of leads went from 54 to 134, right? And that took a lot of time, but like the volume and these up and to the right things, like it is not necessarily driving your business, and that drives me up the wall.
Yeah, and that's the second sub point. And again, self-serving, and I'm not trying to be self-righteous and all this kind of stuff, but like this
be
is
self-righteous.
It's my talk is on holding your marketing accountable. And so whether it's not just a function of do it yourself, right? It's if your in-house people are managing this and they don't know what they're doing. If your agency is managing this and they don't know what they're doing. That's why we sound like broken records on this cost per qualified consultation stuff, connecting your business metrics, new clients and open case files. It's because of all this stuff. I mean, this is why we get so fired up about this stuff, is because just the other week, someone sent me some other agency's reporting, and it's all the same thing. It's up and to the right. We're slapping high fives, and I'm like, show me the clients, and they're like, well, we don't really look at it like that, right? We don't connect that far, right? We do conversion pixel fires. We can show you ranking reports. We can show you traffic. We can show you awareness. We can show you impressions. We can show you reach. But if you're not connecting it back to this, you're missing all this stuff, and there's just so much waste in there. Anyway, end of rant.
It's not your. So what else? So grab a slide out of your jack. What else were you talking about? Give me another one.
Well, by the way, I think let's do an Easter egg in here. If you want our decks, go to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing's LinkedIn page and send us a message through Lunch Hour Legal Marketing LinkedIn page, and we'll send you our decks. How about that? See who's paying attention. No one wants the decks anyway, so no one's going to do it. So this goes into my other talk, which is on this concept of like legal SEO beyond keywords and links. And look, I say that's the title. It's it's supposed to be catchy. You gotta get to the conference attendee bait there. I'm not saying that keywords and links are dead. I'm not saying that local SEO is dead. I'm certainly not saying SEO is dead. But understanding how users are using these technologies, whether it's Google with AIOs, whether it's if Google switches to full-time AI mode, whether it's ChatGPT, Perplexity, Notebook LLM, whatever it is, if you're stuck in the mindset of keyword rankings, build links, direct response, and you're not thinking about the impact on how user behavior is changing, right? How it's not just a search, click, call. I mean, for some people it is, but for a lot of people it's changing. It's prompt refinement. It's query refinement. It's AIO showing up with 0 click, but your brand showing up. And back to this point, it makes it that much more important that you're holding this marketing stuff accountable for actual client generation, because guess what's we're already starting to see it. A lot of SEOs are reporting traffic's down. And they're blaming it on 0 click, they're blaming it on AIOs, they're blaming it on a bunch of other things. But if you're just taking it to traffic, if you're a law firm and you're just looking at top line traffic, your instinct is going to be traffic's down, fire my marketing people, and go chase the next marketing person who says they can raise their traffic up. But you're going to be in a doom loop of this because there are macro changes going on to both the way users are using the technologies and how the platforms are impacting. They're training us to use the technologies in a different way. If you're not on that stuff, you're going to be very confused about what the heck's going on when all of a sudden your Google business profile now is buried beneath LSAs, AIOs, and also is embedded with its own AI stuff where you're like, I'm seeding it with Q&As like you told me. And all of a sudden now it's like, well, people are just interacting with your business through the Gemini interface on your GBP profile.
This focus on traffic, maybe, you know what? When we come back, we're going to talk about traffic and clients and how that relationship is often inverse.
And we're back. And I wanted to pick up, Conrad, you were saying something before the break about this connection between traffic and clients. I want you to elaborate on that because I think this is really important.
Well, we've beat this horse in the past and will continue to do so. But I think one of those KPIs that you've heard Gyi saying is a terrible KPI is traffic. And I think in many cases, you're convinced that the more traffic you get, the better you're doing at SEO, which is, it might be true sometimes, but it is rarely always true. And, Gyi, there's a concept that just getting traffic in and of itself is all you need to start ranking for the hard things. I think we've
That's still a thing out there? Is that going on? Are you hearing that at your conference?
That is, I'm hearing that at conferences from SEO experts. Every conference I go to, some SEO expert will tell you that. And I think that is very, very
with real SEO experts?
Well, I mean, you can be an SEO expert if you're willing to write a check.
Right.
Right?
Thank you.
That's why I'm an SEO expert, Gyi. It's because I've got a checkbook.
Exactly.
All right. So let me give two kind of extreme examples of this. One of which, actually both of which were in my deck that we talked about. But we had a client for whom we did a pretty dramatic page count reduction. They had a lot of what was bluntly garbage content, and you guys know this because we've talked. The SEO world has talked about the importance of quality content, the blah 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 blah, and yet you're still barfing out useless stuff. And so anyway, we showed this example where over a period of about a year, we dropped the page count on a site by about 34%. And what happened is their traffic actually went down, but their conversion rate on that traffic improved by 15x. So the numbers look like this: 9 leads when we started, 9 leads a quarter from search when we started, 100 leads in the final quarter after we had done that reduction in page count. So we reduced the content, we reduced the traffic, but the firm was doing that much better because their content strategy was so garbage.
And you're talking organic leads. So we're talking just SEO channel.
Just SEO channel.
Yeah. And so what do you tell your clients why that's happening? Why do you think that's happening?
Well, I mean, so let me we'll use concrete examples because it's so obvious when you think about this. Let me give you a very common blog post. Smith & Jones would like to congratulate Mary Murphy for winning Super Lawyers in 2018, right? And it's a 3-sentence blog post about Mary Murphy winning Super Lawyers 5 years ago. So it's a garbage piece of content. No one is looking for it, right? No one is looking for Mary Murphy in 2019. And it overall deprecates the value of what is actually on the site, right? And so we talk about content and penalties for content having a site-wide impact. So if you have a bunch of stuff that no one's looking for that are on these thin garbage pages, right? And like it got really stupid. There are people who have put recipes up on their blog. Like we're so desperate to come up with ideas for blog content. You know, you and I we've used the example of the Brooklyn style pizza in New York, right? And this firm that was getting thousands and thousands of page views for Brooklyn style pizza when they were a construction law firm. It just doesn't do anything, right?
So your point, I just want to again clarify. I think this is important. Your point is that if you get rid of these, 2019 Super Lawyer pages, Google recrawls your site. Those pages are gone. It's viewing your site in a different way that's causing you to have more search visibility, qualified, relevant search visibility that's generating more leads, right? You're saying removing the content, Google changes its view, and you rank for stuff maybe better or stuff that you weren't ranking for before. Is that the idea?
100%. And I have been doing this since 2010 or 11. When we first started, I don't want to say I came up with a concept, but we got really deep on consolidation of content, right? So when I was at Avvo, and this is kind of a funny thing, I use this anecdote all the time because it's so clear. We had this Q&A thing where you could ask a question, lawyers would answer the question, and that created content for us. And that was brilliant. And I never thought it would work, but it did. But what happens when you do that is lots of people ask the same variants of the same question. And the most common content, Gyi, what was the most, I'm wondering if you know the punchline. What was the most common content that we had? What was the most common question?
It's not coming to me off the top of my head.
Okay, good. That's good. That's good. Well, I'll just say that's good, and then I'll tell you what the answer is.
Who's the best lawyer? I don't know.
No. The answer to the most common question was a variant of this. I'm 19 and my girlfriend is 17. Can we have sex in Maryland or wherever it might be? Thousands and thousands.
Just in Maryland?
Well, just in Maryland, but thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. I mean,
I would not have guessed that. I wouldn't have guessed that.
I want to say
I would think landlord tenant.
No. It was all about, can we have sex, right? So anyway, we took all of those pages and, right, you should have known. We took all of those pages and turned them into a really good single page with really rich, deep content about that specific issue. And I mean, I spent like a year of my life doing that with all sorts. I mean, it wasn't just that question, but like all sorts of questions. So I really have seen the value of, or the harm in having lots and lots of pages that are fundamentally duplicated or thin, et cetera. So we've been doing this overall. But Gyi, I will tell you, it's actually more nefarious, because if you as an agency convince your clients that traffic is the key indicator that you're doing a good job, and all of a sudden the traffic starts slowing down, or maybe it starts dropping, what are you going to do? Gyi, you want to retain this client and they know what the KPI is. Gyi, what are you going to do?
I'm going to hook up my WordPress API to ChatGPT and pump out as much content as I possibly can.
Well, that's nice. So you might do that.
Well, I'm trying to get traffic. I'm trying to get traffic to go up.
You are a better person than I am, dude. So what you also might do is you might engage with a click farm in, say, India, to drive a whole bunch of traffic to a website.
There you go. That's a good one. See, you're better at this than I am.
No,
I haven't been in Black Hat world in a while.
I've wallowed in the mud with these pigs for so long. Anyway. So
yeah. Well, I'll give another context, just in case there are people who are still skeptical about this, and these guys are full of it. Here's the most obvious one to me.
Okay.
You show up in the local pack. Guess what? People are. I can't tell you how many times I'm like, phone's ringing off the hook for our GBP tracking number, and these are firms that don't have brand, so it's not people looking them up by name. They're it's 80% non-brand, 20% brand. You can see there's no search console data, 0 clicks, tons of phone calls. And there's and you look at qualitative CRM data, like how'd you hear about us? Wasn't from referrals, wasn't from brand. So people that are like, I use Google. They didn't click. They just called right from the search result. And so that's never showing up as traffic anywhere.
Right. Oh, I see what you mean. But you're saying the traffic's useless because
there's
the
no
actual
traffic.
Conversion may have nothing to do with traffic.
Yeah, there's no traffic. Exactly. There's what do we call it? The goosh. The traffic has nothing to do with conversion. I mean, that's a little bit strong, but of course, there's a segment of your overall traffic that's relevant that converts, and that's what you should be looking at, right? That's why again, broken record. That's why the atomic particle here is the qualified consultation. Work yourself backwards from the qualified consultation, not from traffic, not trying to go through and like filter all this traffic. Forget about all that stuff. Start with your qualified consultations and work backwards. It's going to tell you the story.
All right. It's almost like, Gyi, next episode, we could do a segment on how to segment your traffic to just qualified quality traffic. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, there we go. If you need a reason to subscribe or come back next time, we're gonna step by step walk you through how to do this.
That was masterful subscription ask. That was Podcasting 201, brought to you by Gyi. He's been doing this longer than I am. He just seamlessly threw in a good reason to subscribe. I left the bait, and you told people how to bite it. Well played.
I've been reading all these podcast blogs. Just kidding. I haven't been doing that. Maybe I should. Anyway, thank you so much for coming and listening and getting through these rants that Conrad and I have. We really appreciate you. If you're just landing here, don't know what the heck's going on, check us out on YouTube and subscribe to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing wherever you like to get your podcast. Until next time, Conrad and Gyi from MTMP and ABA TECHSHOW signing off. Lunch Hour Legal Marketing.
Money makes a it makes a world go round. Money makes a world go round. Yeah, money make a world go round. Money makes a world go round. Yeah, money make a